Welcome back to Talking Wolves. We've got a brand new match preview. The games are coming thick and fast once again, and Wolves are going to be on their travels this week. It's a midweek fixture at Villa Park against Midlands rivals Aston Villa. Going to be a tricky game. Two Midlands clubs, two fairly new Spanish managers, two very good managers at that as well. It's going to be a really intriguing game between these two sides. Of course, Wolves hoping to try and get some more points on the board. It was a win on Boxing Day against Everton, but a defeat on New Year's Eve against Manchester United. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, guys, and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Defeat for Wolves, unfortunately, against Manchester United, but I think you can see the performance levels. And overall, to watch the game, it just seemed a little bit better. Still not quite good enough. I don't think we're threatening the opposition goalkeeper enough. But the performance levels from certain Wolves players is certainly a lot better. And now, obviously, with it being New Year, Happy New Year, by the way, the transfer window is officially open. So, Wolves have got Matheus Cunha, who is available for selection, and it'll be interesting to see if Wolves use him on Wednesday against Aston Villa. But of course, there is, like I said, within the next week or so, we've got 3 games, so lots of game time for lots of players, not just Cunha, players that have probably not got as much game time as they should have recently, and fringe players. There's going to be lots of that, but we're hoping to see a few more players through the door. We've spoke about it a couple of times on the channel that Matt Hobbs, the sporting director, after the signing of Cunha on Christmas Day, that they said they wanted to try and get 1 or 2 more through the door before the new year. Obviously, that hasn't happened, so hopefully there's just some minor issues there that can get ironed out quite quickly, and we see a couple more players through the door by the weekend before the game against Liverpool in the FA Cup. Aston Villa, on the other hand, a decent start to life under Unai Emery. Just the 1 defeat, which was against Liverpool. They've got a couple of good wins. Most recently, a game against Tottenham on Sunday, on New Year's Day, which was a win for them. I mean, Spurs haven't been great themselves recently, but Aston Villa had a game plan, stuck to it, and it worked perfectly for them. Douglas Luiz, I would say, is probably one of the pick of the players for them at the moment, who's really had a decent turn in form, starting to look like a really decent player again. His shot stung the fingertips of Lloris, which allowed Villa to create a move which they scored from, and then Douglas Luiz finished off a decent move for their second goal as well. But like I said, Tottenham weren't really at the race. We got the double over Villa last year, of course, dramatic 3-2 win after being 2-0 down under Bruno Lage at Villa Park last season. A late deflected Ruben Neves free kick, and then a win against them at Molineux as well. One of our final wins, I think, of last season. There weren't many that second part of the season, but that was one of the very few that we had in there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Wolves set up. I've gone with this lineup for the game, as you can see here. I'll start with the front 3. I think Cunha's got to come straight in. I've gone with him through the middle there, Matheus Cunha. I've gone with Podence as long as he's fit, either side of him. I've gone with Hwang again, but again, it could so easily be Guedes, who hasn't really had much of a go under Lopetegui yet. It could be even Adama, but I've gone with I've gone with Hwang there. Sorry, midfield 3 for me. I would love to see Boubacar Traore in there, but I still think it'll be unchanged from that Manchester United game. I thought Mateus had a much better game. Martinho, I thought his work rate, although the physically, like the pace isn't probably quite there anymore. I thought his work rate was phenomenal, obviously alongside Neves as well. The back 4, I think, will be the same, although Aït-Nouri probably deserves to try and get a start. I think the games against Liverpool and Forest will give him an opportunity to do that, alongside, obviously, so Bueno, Collins, Kilman and Semedo, with Jose Sarr still in goal. Villa have got obviously a couple of injury possible issues for themselves. We'll talk about that during the opposition perspective shortly. And of course, once again, we've got our BetMate part. So big up to the guys at BetMate, supported us throughout 2022. And we're looking forward to a decent partnership with them once again in 2023. If you haven't got involved already, it's a fantasy football type game where you can win lots of cash. a link to join is in the top of the description. The team I've gone with, it's the Premier League Wednesday 8 p.m. kickoff pot. So there's 2 games involved. Entry is £3, £450 guaranteed pot. Team I've gone with, because the 2 games are Palace, Tottenham, and Villa Wolves. I've gone with Hugo Lloris in goal, Perisic, Nathan Collins at the back, Douglas Luiz as my captain in the midfield alongside Neves, Diego Costa and Harry Kane up front. I do want Mateus Cunha in there, but he's not quite on the game as I record. So if Cunha comes in, I will start him ahead of Diego Costa. Of course, guys, 18 plus, please do gamble aware, and UK residents only. Now, for the Villa perspective, I spoke to the Villa podcast for the love of Paul McGrath. Now, he spoke loads about Villa, Emery, what we can expect, a little bit about Michael Beale in there as well, who obviously turned down the Wolves job. So then, guys, delighted to be alongside Neil from the Villa podcast for the love of Paul McGrath. How are you doing, Neil? How are you keeping?
I'm doing good. I was just telling you there off camera that it's bitterly cold here today in Ireland, but yesterday's result, or the recent results that we've had under Unai Emery, are beginning to warm the cockles of my heart, and I'm sure we'll get on to that in a moment as well, because like you guys, we have a new manager too, and we're seeing the fruits of that reward. So thanks a million for having me on, though. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah, we'll get into that as well. It's been a strange season, I'd say, for both teams, to be fair. Villa doing a little bit better than we are at the moment. 12th place in the league, but started off 2023 perfectly with a win yesterday against Spurs. What's the story of the season been so far? What's the mood like in the Villa fan base? What key moments have you seen so far this season?
Do you know what? That's actually a really good question, and I think it's taken a lot of reflection, because the season was primed to be a good one under Steven Gerrard. Had a really good trip down to Australia, or so we thought.
Yeah.
We were undefeated in those trips, and things looked like they were good. There was a lot of good PR work done by the club down there. It seemed like it was a pretty good trip. But then, you know, we come home and we find out that maybe it wasn't as good as it could have been, and early results weren't very good under Steven Gerrard, and it began to turn very quickly. And it began to turn from all angles, which was the strange thing. And look, Villa have been through enough managers in my livelihood. I'm supporting Villa nearly 30 years at this stage, over 30 years actually at this stage. And Villa have had a lot of managers in my time, but I've never seen it turn as quickly and turn as badly as it did against Steven Gerrard. And look, a lot of that was his own making. He came out with some silly things in the media as well.
Yeah.
He weren't getting the results in the field. We felt we had the players, and he just didn't know how to use them. There was consistent tinkering, and over the course of the year he was here, he never found his first 11. At first 11, he could hang his hat on. So then the force was changed, or the change was forced, should I say, after the Fulham game. We were absolutely turgid, and then the rumour mill started going, and Unai Emery came in through the door, and I have to say, absolutely delighted with him since. He brings wealth of experience and cup winning mentality, and he's a name. He's a managerial name, because when we signed Steven Gerrard, he was a kind of a managerial name that he was going to try and bring a bit of a lure to the club, but he didn't bring results. And we're hoping Unai Emery can do that, but so far so good. And that's really kind of how our season has gone. There was a lot of weeks where we were waiting for us to get rid of our manager, which seems pretty silly. And while we always backed the team, we always felt it was coming before the World Cup break. And I think you guys were pretty much in the same boat yourselves as well.
Yeah, similar sort of thing. And I think we've both brought in a similar sort of caliber and name of manager as well. Emery's a fantastic appointment. I was really surprised that Villa were able to get someone of that caliber who's doing pretty well at the time over in Spain as well. Do you think, personally for you, Neil, Gerrard, it was the right time for him to go as well?
So when Gerrard was first signed, and I know I keep going back to that, but when he was first signed, we were skeptical there on the podcast, from the point of view that there just wasn't enough concrete evidence in the tank. Yes, he had stopped Celtic winning the 10 in a row and stuff above in Scotland, but that was a Celtic team that was managed by Neil Lennon. And that wasn't exactly Celtic's best. Celtic didn't send their best in that year. And look, that's no slight on Neil Lennon either, because he's done quite a lot for Celtic as well. But he came down here, and we had to do an awful lot of digging to find out what his backroom staff were with Steven Gerrard. Obviously, Michael Beale was in there, Tom Culshaw, all these guys came out. We did a lot of talking to the Rangers management, or to the Rangers podcast and things like that, to see. We spoke to training ground guru to really get a good fit. And we said, the package is exactly what what we would get excited for. But it wasn't really Steven Gerrard we were getting excited for. And then we had a couple of signings and we were like, oh, maybe he's the figurehead that's able to talk to these players and get them in because of who he is. But the results on the field were really not good. And there was flashes and games, but the consistency was nowhere near there. And it began to unravel pretty quickly. His training ground methodologies and stuff like that. I don't know, like we don't know what the story was there. It seemed to be very much all circumvented around Michael Beale, and then Michael Beale leaves the QPR, and I think at that stage everybody went, okay, we're going to panic now because we're not sure Steven Gerrard is able to do this without this man either. And it turned out that he likely wasn't. So and that's kind of being fair, I think, as opposed to I hope it doesn't come across as bitter, but that's kind of the way it went.
Yeah. No, well, we were linked with Michael Beale when Lopetegui first rejected us, and that's what a lot of people pointed to, saying, well, he's the assistant to Gerrard. But then a lot of people saying, well, a lot of people think he was the brains behind Gerrard's training and tactics and so on, and that's why it probably hadn't gone as well this season, like you'd said. But like we've been saying, Emery is a fantastic appointment. What has he changed for you, Neil, in terms of tactics? Has the formation changed, play style? What are the big differences that you've noticed so far?
Well, that's definitely what has changed. Is he's got the same group of players. I think I suppose the biggest thing that has changed is he's got more out of midfield. Under Dean Smith, under Steven Gerrard, I think we conceded an awful lot of ground in midfield. We were okay to retreat and defend on the edge of our box. Emery still has that in there as well. But what he's done is John McGinn was on a downward slide for the last 10 months. Under basically since the turn of the year in 2022, excuse me, John McGinn was on a bit of a downward slide. He's really been brought out of his shell again in this wide right midfielder role, whereas so he can play that hybrid between what he plays for Scotland and what he used to play when he was playing well for Aston Villa. That's worked well. He's like, it's funny, fans think that they know every single player that they have inside out. And Unai Emery's come in, he's gotten players to kind of gotten people to think a small bit differently about players. Douglas Luiz is looking an awful lot better. We're playing people like Leon Bailey is playing as a solid striker as opposed to a winger previously. And I think probably the two biggest areas, specifically since the World Cup is finished, but the two biggest players I think that have really made people kind of stand up and think, oh, this is something different. Is Ashley Young keeping Matty Cash out of the team at right back, and Robin Olsen. The Villa fans really were not confident in that Robin Olsen, and he's played 2 games. He played against Liverpool. I think he played better than a lot of fans think he did against Liverpool. But then he had a really good game yesterday against Spurs, and I think that it's more so just the confidence in players that they've been given. We might get on to what way Villa will set up against Wolves, but against Spurs yesterday, we played 6 at the back at times.
Yeah,
it sounds a bit silly, it sounds a bit draconian, it sounds a bit like, oh, they parked the bus and they were dull as dishwater. But all we did was we took the punches from Spurs, and then the second half we opened up, and we were by far the better team in the second half, and we demoralized Spurs, and we would never have done that under a Steven Gerrard regime. Not a hope in hell. But Emery, he knew what he needed to do to kind of stifle Spurs early on. He took into account, I suppose, that they were missing a few players. Kulusevski was missing. Son hasn't really hit the heights since he's come back from the World Cup. And Harry Kane was, like, everything he touched was turning to gold. But we kept them quiet early doors. We hit him early in the second half. And that was really the catalyst for how we've played really under Unai Emery since he's come into and managed the team.
Yeah, I mean, I caught the game yesterday as well. I think it's probably the first half an hour. I don't think Harry Kane had a touch on the ball. But I think that's the difference and the big thing with these managers that, yes, it sounds like what you described. It does sound a bit defensive, a bit boring. But when you actually watch the game, I think Emery, and I'm hoping Lopetegui will be the same. You're not going to go to the White Hart Lane or whatever it's called now and out football Spurs. You've got to be, wiser than them. And that's exactly what Villa did. And like you said, you took the punches, but the 2 chances Villa had, you took brilliantly. And I thought Douglas Luiz, big part in both goals as well. Looks, that shot that stung Lloris for the first goal, and obviously the second goal was fantastic as well.
Yeah.
So I think Emery's only lost once, hasn't he, so far in charge of you guys, and you're looking good so far. So how do you expect him to start? The big ones for me, obviously Ashley Young keeping his place, possibly at right back, and the goalkeeper situation. Like you said, you've got a World Cup winner who sat on the bench yesterday. I believe, now this is an interesting fact, Emi Martinez is the only ex-Wolves player, because we had him on loan for a short while,
Yes.
ex-Wolves player to have started and won a World Cup final. I think we had England players in the 66 squad but never played, but that's an interesting fact. But do you think he'll come back in his place, or do you think Olsen will keep his place in the team?
I'll be honest, I don't know.
Mm,
I look, I think it's fair to say everybody would give Robin Olsen a pat on the back and a shake of the hand and say, listen, thanks a million for the last two games. But
mm,
I suppose it really just depends. Is Emi Martinez back in the right headspace? You know, it takes a while to come down off that high. I
mm,
have full confidence in Emi Martinez. I would have started him yesterday, you know, because you look at it, Christian Romero has won the World Cup as well, starting centre half, and he plays for Spurs yesterday.
mhm,
Now, was he at his best? He probably wasn't, and he had a bit of a silly yellow card. But
mm,
you know, when you've got a goalkeeper who maybe it is the mentality. Maybe that's why he wasn't started. That you know you really need to have your head in the game when you're in goals. Whereas at centre half, you know you're it's probably more a physical thing. Are you physically ready to play and
yeah,
whatever else? But I think he probably comes back into the team. It'd be interesting. We picked up a couple of injuries yesterday. Douglas Luiz, I think, is a dead leg. We haven't heard much on that. Um, John McGinn, I can't see you, John McGinn, being fit to play against Wolves. Looked like he pulled up with a hammer injury, and I would imagine we'll probably see that double right back situation that happened after John McGinn went off. And you know what? This is something I think that is clever from Unai Emery, because Matty Cash has his experience of playing central midfield and right wing for Forest before he joined Aston Villa as well, and he's too good a player to have on the bench, I think. So
yeah,
by being able to have Ashley Young, and Ashley Young is the organizer of is an organizer within our defense. He's an old head, but he's like it, to this day. I keep on saying, look, put me and Ashley Young in the same room. We're both the same age. There's a month between us in age. It looks like we're from two different planets. Like, you know, it's that's kind of the way it is. So fair play to him for looking after his body, and he's been one of our best players this season. So to drop him would be a bit knee jerk, I think. So I think you could see the two of those on the right wing. But I think that the big one is obviously, will Douglas Luiz be fit or not? We're
mhm,
missing Jacob Ramsey. We're getting a bit threadbare in the middle of midfield at the moment. Boubacar Kamara is a Rolls Royce of a player. He's just really good. But we need that. Himself and Douglas Luiz have had a great kind of access there. Maybe you might see the former Wolves man Leo Dendoncker come in there.
oh
Maybe you
yeah,
might
yeah,
see Morgan Sanson come in. I'd imagine it'd be Dendoncker that will come into that. But then Dendoncker wasn't on the bench for Villa yesterday either. So you know, there is questions about what way that midfield is going to line up. And I think the transfer market will come at a good time for Aston Villa, specifically in more the attacking positions. But I think if the right opportunity comes up for maybe another midfielder and certainly another centre half, I think that they'll take it.
is there money to spend for Villa? I'd assume Emery would have, joined with knowing he's going to get a bit of backing in Jan.
Oh, I'd be very surprised. Maybe not in January. I'd say once again, Villa like to find their way around the market in January. Last year, obviously, they brought in Coutinho, Digne, and the January transfer window before that, they brought in Morgan Sanson. So they like to look for opportunity costs. They had to pounce on the likes of Digne. Because he would have been snapped up by somebody, and he's come into the club and he's solidified that left back position after Matty Cash left. But I think there will be money to spend. Like, we all love to play the transfer window game. We all love to say, "Oh, I'd love Marcus Thuram, and I'd love João Felix is linked with Aston Villa," and you know we all talk about it because and people give out to us in podcasts for talking about it, but that's fine too. But it's nice to talk about it when we're linked to it. But whether they sign or not is something different. And I personally would be surprised if we signed either of those two players in January. I thought before the World Cup, Thuram would have had. We might have been able to get him, but I think he's got loftier notions now at this stage. And I think that's okay to talk about too. But the great thing about having Unai Emery as a manager is he's worked with older players and he's got the best out of it. He's squeezed the last bit of juice out of them. You look at the likes of Daniel Pereira that's playing with Villarreal,
Yeah.
Raul Albiol, Coquelin, Etienne Capoue, all these guys who came from the Premier League that have gone in there and have worked well. Maybe he goes back and he raids Villarreal for someone like a Danjuma or Nicholas Jackson or somebody like that. But it's an interesting transfer window because I think the money is there, but I have no idea what transfer strategy Unai Emery will want to implement.
Mm.
And that's an exciting thing for me as well. We've been linked today with Vedat Mariki from Mallorca. I don't know a whole pile about whether that's going to come true. He's a big beanpole of a striker. It looks some different to all the rest of the strikers we have, but money I don't think would be an object for from our ownership point of view. But whether we just go and splash it willy nilly, I think is open to debate. I'd imagine Spurs will spend, or sorry, I imagine Wolves will spend heavily in this January transfer window. You've already gone and spent 45 million on Well, you've loaned
Yeah.
Cunha with the option to
Yeah,
buy him
yeah,
for
yeah.
different varying amounts. And Villa were in for Cunha. Well, they were supposedly in for Cunha as well. How do you find that signing? Is it somebody that you need?
It's a strange one because there's been a lot of talk about him, and I think he's a talented footballer, but is he exactly what Wolves need right now? Possibly not. I think everybody knows goals are an issue for us, and it's not like he's a 50-20 goal a season man. So I think there'll be money there for Wolves as well. They were talking about trying to get one or two more done before the window opened, which obviously hasn't happened. So I'm hoping there's some more around the corner. But I think Lopetegui is in a similar situation to Emery. He's coming to a club where probably, no disrespect to Villa or Wolves, they probably want to be the top half of the table. Obviously, they've seen the potential in both clubs. So they know they're going to have to be, the owners know they're going to have to back the manager. So that's what I'm hoping. We're going to see some movements over the next few days or so. Are there any Wolves players that worry you ahead of Wednesday's game, Neil?
Yes, but there's also one Wolves player that I have the biggest man crush on in the whole, and I don't think I'll ever forgive you guys for signing him last summer. But Nathan Collins is,
Yeah.
I've viewed Nathan Collins' career from a bird's eye view from when he was about 15, 16, and he started out with the Irish with the Irish setup. Nathan Collins is he's just brilliant. Like, I just think he's just a really, really good defender. He's young. He's played all across that back four. He's played, he can step out of defense to goal. He scored a goal for Ireland recently. Look it up. I
Yeah.
can't remember who he's just
I've seen
really
it, yeah.
good. And you guys, my podcast is named after Paul McGrath. And genuinely, I believe Nathan Collins is the closest thing I've seen come in at centre half to Paul McGrath, with just his intelligence, the way that he can move his feet, the way he doesn't get flustered, he doesn't get caught under balls and stuff like that. We've had guys like Richard Dunn before, but they've been more kind of like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves here and get down and dirty with strikers and stuff. Nathan Collins has the footwork. I think he's fantastic. So I really like Nathan Collins. I'm not quite sure with the injury situations at Wolves at the moment, but guys I still think you always have to fear Raul Jimenez at times, and also your pace on the wings as well. I think with Pedro Neto and the likes, I think that you'd have to fear those guys too. Look, Ruben Neves loves a goal against Villa, especially last minute goals. When we're 2-0 up and you come back to win 3-2, still haven't forgiven you guys for that either. But the flux, I think, between the two teams is what's going to make this interesting. We've had our guy in maybe a small bit earlier than you guys, but we both have had that break to try and get that identity of the teams together. And it'll be interesting. And look, it's going to be an interesting battle between two Spanish managers who probably know each other inside out in the Premier League. So it's going to be an interesting one on Wednesday night for sure.
Yeah, I think Pedro Neto is definitely injured, but even I'm surprised you haven't mentioned the likes of Adama Traore as well, Neil, ex-Villa. But he's always, I don't know if he'll start on Wednesday. He'll definitely play some part, I think. He came on against Manchester United, had a decent impact, but again, he didn't have a number 9 to aim his crosses or passes to, so that's the issue for Wolves at the minute. And Neil, score prediction, if I had to trouble you for
one. It's a hard one. I've gone 1-1 draws every time for nearly every single game that Emery has been manager of. I think Villa's home ground kind of, what is it, that kind of bias, I think, might help them. I think in this game, I think Villa fans will be really up for this, because not even the most ardent Villa fan would have thought that we would have. We punched Liverpool, but the problem was that they connected with their uppercuts when we made mistakes, and we couldn't connect with ours. Leon Bailey missed 2 chances and so on. I'd like to say Villa are going to win 2-1. I just think that there's just a good feeling around Villa at the moment. And I think the fans will be raucous on a Wednesday night under lights. I don't think there's any other fans in the Premier League that look forward to games under lights than Villa fans. And maybe I'm just biased because I am one. But it's like everybody just talks about. They look down the list and go, "Oh, a game under lights, brilliant! I'm going to that game." Because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because we had those old floodlights with the A and the V on them back in the day, and it became synonymous with the club. But I'm going to go with a 2-1 Villa win, but I would not be surprised if this was a draw because Villa don't win games back to back usually, So it's you always have to have a bit of doubt in your mind when you're making any prediction about Aston Villa.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky game. I think close game for both teams, probably a goal either way or a draw, most likely result as well. Neil, thank you very much. Where can people find you and your podcast if they wish?
Yeah, absolutely. You find our podcast on YouTube or any of the podcast providers because of the name of the podcast. I don't think I've come across any other podcast with Paul McGrath's name in it yet. So you'll be able to find just Google that and you'll find us there. And also we're on Twitter at Love McGrath Pod. So it's you'll find us anywhere. We're nice and friendly. We don't get into too many spats with other fans teams. We like to have good discussions and good banter about football and discourse like that. We're not. I don't know if I can swear on the podcast, but we're not we're not people who go out to try and force rivalries. And to be honest with you, I don't have any time for that. So we'd love to chat to any of your friends as well, or any of the guys that listen to our podcast and discuss the game.
No problem. I'll make sure I leave a link to the podcast in the description, Neil. And apart from Wednesday and the reverse fixture, I wish you all the best for the rest of the season.
Absolutely, and likewise to you guys too.
Yeah, thanks a lot, mate.
Thank you.
So big thanks to Neil and the guys over at the Villa podcast there. I really do appreciate them jumping on the channel. A nice longer opposition preview for you guys today as well. But let me know your thoughts and score predictions. Massive game for Wolves. Villa on form. Wolves looking better but still not quite there. But this is a must-win game for Wolves. Results went our way on Boxing Day, didn't quite go our way at New Year, so we're still in that bottom three. A win here would be absolutely massive for Wolves, and fingers crossed we can get it. We'll be at Villa Park on Wednesday. Keep your eye out for the match reaction and the fans react. Fingers crossed on Wednesday night. And I'll see you soon for the FA Cup game against Liverpool, and obviously any transfer bits that we do in between. Until then, guys, once again, Happy New Year, and I'll see you all very soon.